All right. Well, welcome to tonight's event. Sustainable San Mateo County is really excited to host this webinar with three incredible speakers to talk about how, as community members, you all can influence the policies of your cities, schools, and even employers to support plant-forward food systems. So let's get started. I'm Sarah Hubbard, Executive Director of Sustainable San Mateo County, and I'd like to welcome you all to this really special event. Last October, SSMC launched our indicators report on the impact that food systems have on our environment and the solutions available to governments, schools, businesses, and communities. There's quite a bit of interest in going deeper on this topic, so we've set up a series of 3 webinars to talk with experts about what our communities can do to address this third largest driver of greenhouse gas emissions. Tonight, we welcome you to our first webinar. This one is intended for community members who want to have a voice in what their cities, schools, and places of business are doing to transition to a plant-forward environment. I know that many of you are aware of SSMC's work, but before we get into our discussion for tonight, I'll share a quick overview for those who may be less familiar. SSMC is a nonprofit driven by a powerful vision, a sustainable future for everyone in San Mateo County. For more than 30 years, our mission has been to stimulate action to make San Mateo County more sustainable on economic, environmental, and social equity issues through empowering information and advocacy. These 3 E's, the environment, economy, and social equity, encompass a really wide range of topics like climate change and greenhouse gas reduction, land use, water and air quality, affordable housing, transportation, food security, childcare, and more. We inform, inspire, and empower local communities across these topics through our core programs. We provide data across time for more than 90 metrics in our sustainability dashboard, enabling communities to identify both challenges and progress. Our Ideas Bank offers proven solutions to address many sustainability challenges. And each year, we research and publish an indicators report that combines both metrics and solutions for a single focused subject, and also provides recommendations for action. Recent report topics include the climate impact of food in 2025, equitable EV charging infrastructure in 2024, the well-being of children, youth, and families in 2023, and building electrification in 2022. Our 2026 report will be on improving the urban tree canopy. As you can see, we handle a wide range of topics. Additionally, our annual Sustainability and Green Building Awards are one way we acknowledge progress and inspire further action. And finally, all of these programs are supported by meetings, webinars, roundtable discussions, newsletters, and a host of other communications that foster community collaboration and impact. Tonight, I'll lay the groundwork with an overview of the indicators report, key findings, and recommendations. Then we'll hear from each of our panelists, followed by a Q&A session. So in 2025, we researched the connection between the food system and greenhouse gas emissions and what we can do locally to mitigate those emissions. Before I share a few highlights, I want to just take a moment to thank the sponsors who made the report possible. Their support allows SSMC to produce independent, data-driven research and to make it accessible to our community, helping inform local action and inspire meaningful change. We are very grateful for their partnership. So, why did we focus on food in 2025? Food systems are one of the largest yet least addressed drivers of climate change. And when we say food systems, we mean all of the parts of the network of activities involving food, from farming and transportation to consumption and even to waste management. Beyond climate, the food system places intense pressure on ecosystems, driving freshwater depletion, biodiversity loss, and pollution of both air and water. So, just focusing on emissions, this chart shows global greenhouse gas emissions by sector. The data comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the UN scientific body reporting on leading climate science. According to the data, agricultural production, shown here in yellow, accounts for 22% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. This is higher than the emissions from transportation, even, which are shown here in green. Just over half of the emissions related to agricultural production come from deforestation, which is done mostly to clear land to graze animals and to grow crops to feed them. Another quarter comes from methane producing livestock, like cows, and the rest comes from practices such as soil tilling and rice cultivation. A little closer to home, in San Mateo County, food consumption accounts for 17% of total household emissions. As the chart shows, emissions from food rank third after transportation and services. Services include things like healthcare and entertainment. For San Mateo County, this chart shows the breakdown of the emissions from 6 categories of foods consumed at home. The category that has the highest emissions includes meat, poultry, fish, and eggs, shown here in red with 31%. Animal-derived foods, meat and dairy combined, make up 45% of total emissions from home food consumption. The average emissions per capita from food consumption really varies from across the county. The map on the left here shows our county with each city and town a different shade of blue based on their per capita emissions from food, with higher emissions per capita being in darker blue. We recently added this metric to our sustainability dashboard, and you can find it on our website. The historical trend on the right shows that emissions have declined since 2009, averaging 2.2 metric tons per person in 2023. Our research also showed that most local climate action plans, the plans that local governments develop to outline their strategies to address climate change, they rarely mention food consumption as a source of greenhouse gas emissions or even as a mitigation strategy. But interviews with city and county staff revealed clear opportunities to reduce food-related emissions through education, municipal food procurement, and emissions tracking and reporting. Around the world, local governments are using their economic influence, policy tools, and public visibility to reduce the impacts of food consumption. Many begin with small steps, such as symbolic resolutions, and then expand to procurement policies or binding ordinances that make those changes lasting. To our local governments, we recommended these 5 strategies to mitigate emissions from food consumption. Set targets and track progress on food-related greenhouse gas reduction. Educate the community about the environmental and health benefits of plant-based diets. Increase access to plant-based meals. Support local businesses in providing plant-based options through incentives and technical assistance. And recognize leaders in sustainable food practices. These are approaches local governments can take and that individuals like you can advocate for. To learn more and see examples from other communities, I invite you to read the 2025 Indicators Report on SSMC's website. You can access it through the QR code shown here. With that background, I'd now like to introduce our first speaker and panelist. So, Dr. Alka Agarwal is a psychiatrist in California State University, East Bay, where she leads the campus sustainability committee's plant forward nutrition initiatives in collaboration with the campus dining services and Compass Foods. She serves on the City of Campbell's Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee, where she's working to advance plant forward nutrition policy and city-sponsored education. She also serves on the Santa Clara County Medical Association's Environmental Health Committee, where she guides plan forward policy efforts and educates healthcare professionals on the public health, climate, and environmental benefits of plant based diets. In her previous role as Director of Clinical Research at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, she designed and published clinical trials on plant based nutrition, developed plant based nutrition curricula, and advocated for plant forward policies on Capitol Hill. Elka, we are so happy to have you here tonight. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to walk you through how I helped get plant-based diets into Campbell's Climate Action Plan, the keys to my success, and most importantly, how you can do this in your own city. Next slide. So I started by attending city council meetings to better understand their priorities, because I wanted to present plant-based diets as a solution that was aligned with the city's goals and not just my own. Next slide. This also allowed me to build relationships with city council members and to find community allies even before mentioning plant-based diets. Next slide. So I started by looking for my way in, and I realized that my city had just approved a climate action plan, or CAP. So it seemed like the perfect opportunity to align plant-based diets with the city's priorities. Now, if your own city doesn't have a climate action plan, ask your city council to create one and volunteer to help with it. That's exactly how Campbell got ours. Many cities also have a sustainability committee that you can join. If yours doesn't have one, ask the city council to create one. These groups often focus heavily on electrification, for example, and so this is a great opportunity for you to educate them on how plant-based diets are really an essential part of any climate solution. Most cities also have a youth commission, which often has significant influence with city council. They really listen to the youth. And young people tend to be more open to plant-based diets, so they may already have a plant-based initiative that you can join, or they may be willing to support one that you bring forward. Youth commissions and other youth groups can provide visibility, momentum, and give your initiative some political support. And from personal experience, they are a really fun group to work with. Next slide. So the next step for me was getting a seat at the table. I applied to be on the Climate Action Plan's advisory committee because I wanted to be in the room where decisions were made, where I could help shape things from the inside to ensure plant-based diets were included in the final plan. Now, if your Climate Action Plan doesn't have an advisory committee, you can still offer to volunteer and help lead the effort. You can also speak at city council meetings, submit public comments, and make sure to attend all the community feedback sessions for the Climate Action Plan so your voice can be heard advocating for plant-based diets. Next slide. Then I paid attention to who or what would ultimately determine whether plant-based diets would be included in the CAP, which in my case was city council approval and community support specifically for plant-based diets. Now, when the first draft of our CAP left out food emissions, I spoke up at that city council meeting. And I shared clear data-driven evidence on food emissions as a reason for clear data-driven evidence on food emissions rather than making an emotional plea for plant-based diets to be included in our CAP. And as a result, the city council really heard what I was saying. They appreciated the data and they agreed to include food emissions in our CAP. Now that decision for them to really approve and encourage the inclusion of food emissions in our CAP, that really was a turning point because it opened the door for me to then introduce plant-based diets as a climate solution. I also volunteered at community feedback sessions to ensure that plant-based diets were included in the conversation. Because if we're not explicitly asking about plant-based diets, we can't demonstrate community support for them. Next slide. So, for example, the Climate Action Plan team created vision cards to help community members prioritize what they wanted included in the CAP in terms of food. They had cards for food waste, community gardens, and farmers markets, but they had nothing that mentioned plant-based diets. Next slide. So I created one for them to use that explicitly said plant-based diets. Next slide. And so once all the community feedback was compiled, it showed clear support for including plant-based diets in the CAP, something we could only demonstrate because we explicitly asked about it. Next slide. So once the door was open to include plant-based diets in the CAP, I needed some guidance on how to turn this into an actual policy. And since West Hollywood and LA County had already passed plant-based policies, I reached out to the people behind those wins. And I learned from webinars just like this one. Next slide. So to lay the groundwork for a city plant-based policy, I needed to show why lowering food emissions mattered specifically in Campbell. So to do this, I pushed to include a consumption-based inventory in the CAP, just like the one we saw in the indicators report, which looks at emissions across the life cycle of what we consume. And that analysis revealed food as a third largest source of emissions from Campbell households, similar to San Mateo County. Next slide. So that data allowed us to include a powerful visual comparing the climate impacts of animal foods versus plant-based foods. And it also allowed me to then include some educational content on the environmental harms of meat and dairy, health benefits of plant-based diets, and some practical guidance on how to eat more plant-based. Next slide. And all of that paved the way for me to help shape a recommendation that the City Council pass a plant-based policy to reduce food emissions. So this recommendation is included in the CAP. And the reason for this is so that once the CAP is approved, I can come back to City Council and say, you approved the CAP that recommends passing a plant-based policy. I'd like to help you do that. So it kind of sets the groundwork for that. Next slide. So that's where things stand now with our CAP. We're waiting for City Council to approve it, which should happen in the next few months. So this process has taken about 2 years. So it definitely requires patience and persistence. So for example, in the meantime, I'm still showing up for the CAP. I'm attending every CAP advisory meeting, reviewing each draft that they send our way to make sure that plant-based language stays in. And I'm also using this time to prepare for the next step, which is to pass a plant-based policy. Next slide. And to do that, I'm building a coalition of support. So this is where those early relationships that you've built with City Council and the community really come into play. I'm identifying champions on City Council, so which members are most likely to support a plant-based policy, partnering with youth groups like Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action. They're a wonderful, really bright group of young folks. And then I'm bringing in healthcare professionals to build some credibility. And of course, the bigger the coalition, the greater the impact. So if you'd like to join our efforts in Campbell and learn what we're doing, please reach out. We would love your support. And then let's do the same in your city and every city. Thank you.
Volka, thank you so much for your presentation. It's so inspiring to hear what progress you've made with the climate action plan in your community. I'm now happy to introduce Jan LeBond. He is the chief researcher and speaker for Plant-Based Advocates. Jan works to help others understand the need to accelerate the global shift to a healthier, more sustainable, and more just plant-based food system. Jan, thanks for joining us tonight.
Good to be here. Thank you. Hey, so thank you all for joining the webinar tonight and learning what you can do to help in your local community with some global issues. This is truly, I think, global, act local type effort here. So as a way, a little background, Plant-Based Advocates is a nonprofit based here in the South Bay, actually formed in Los Gatos. And I myself grew up in Palo Alto, and after college lived in San Mateo County in several places. In San Mateo, in Menlo Park and Redwood City, and even lived for several years way out in La Honda, which is just beautiful, as you folks know, out there. So this is going to be describing a real grassroots effort by several people at the Plant-Based Advocates organization, helped formed it to get plant-based diets on the radar and into a general plan. So go ahead with the next slide, please. So So what were our goals here? So we had a bunch of people that knew about the environmental impacts of our food system, and some foods are a lot more taxing on the environment than others. So our goals were there was a initiative in Los Gatos on a 2040 general plan, and we really wanted to get a plant-based kind of education program into that plan, both primarily in the near term as well as in the longer term. And one of your goals is along the way is to educate local politicians as well as the community members about the impacts of our food choices. And ultimately, I mean, the goal of all this is to improve our sustainability, right? So we can have eating habits and other consumption habits that are more sustainable in the long term, so we don't consume our unfair share amount of resources in terms of land, water, greenhouse emissions, pollutions, all that. So how do we do? So you get a committed group of people that get started. So there's just a core team that we're, within plant-based advocates, again, down in Los Gatos. I said, okay, who's in? Who wants to help with this effort? And you get 3 or 4 people who are like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And then we started bugging, our family members, friends, any others that are right there in the local community, some other neighbors, to go, hey, do you want in on this? Do you want to help with this effort and everything? And we would try to recruit and get additional people through just some social media channels, through the Facebook page that we had for the group, as well as using the Nextdoor platform, if you're familiar with that, just to go, hey, we're trying to get a plant-based education initiative into the general plan in Los Gatos. They're in the planning phases. They're taking public input. Let's go here. And one of the key things in the early days, and I think Olga highlighted this with hers, is like, you do want to form relationships and meet some of the council members in person so they kind of know who you are, know what their priorities are. That is really key, because city councils are dealing with lots of issues, and not just what your particular bugaboo is. So get to know them personally. And the other thing is speaking up at town council meetings. You don't want to have just one person be a squeaky wheel that shows up again and again and again, but you got to have critical mass. Really try to get 3 or 4 or 5, even more, credible spokespeople that can put in a good word for why this is important. Why is this necessary? How will this benefit the community? So we also encouraged others to write emails to the city council, and that was as simple as crafting different types of emails that could be like from restaurant owners to just regular citizens to everything that they could copy and paste and send to their representatives on the town council. So just really just simple grassroots efforts in doing this. There was also tabling, where you set up information tables at the Earth Day events and other events like that to promote, hey, here's Plant-Based Advocates as an organization. One of our initiatives is working with the town council to get plant-based education series really into the general plan and to back that. And we even started a petition and ultimately got nearly 400 people to sign that petition. And that included it was mostly, people right in the town of Los Gatos, but also included some of the council members themselves with whom we formed relationships, and even had some mayors from other cities that were also committed to the cause because they're also aware of the impact and the sustainability impacts of eating one way versus eating in ways that are a lot lighter and consume a lot less resources. So to simplify things for the city council, we also drafted a proposal, which I have a little sample here, and then it enumerated several activities that they could do, from a speaker series to to further tabling at events to things like that. Los Gatos is a relatively small town. There's no agriculture really in the town, and they don't serve a lot of food other than, bagels or whatever at a few council meetings. So it wasn't like you could really impact the food choices or catering elements there. But it was more about impacting things that might happen at the local schools, other community events, and just educating the public. And so we laid out those programs. We put in costs, estimates for each and everything, so that we could get some funding to help do that, pay some of the speakers, etc. And one of the key things in that proposal was highlighting many of the other cities, both within the Bay Area, elsewhere in the United States, and internationally, that are also taking our food systems into account in their sustainability planning. And very similar to what Olka mentioned is that most cities, in fact, it's a state law, the cities have to have a CAP. And the CAP, by the way, is CAP, is a climate action plan. And within a climate action plan, it can also break down into other sustainability initiatives like other energy uses, energy source, water use, pollution, things like that. So if you're just focused on emissions, you can focus on emissions. But if they have a sustainability group or sustainability task force in the town where you live, in the city where you live, getting in on that and educating them about the impact of food choices and food systems, really important. What are the key lessons we learned? Oh, by the way, so we succeeded and we got on there. Persistence is key. Just keep showing up to the council meetings, keep tabling, keep that kind of build a coalition so the council members can see that there's a lot of community support for this. The optics matter in terms of the impact. They see a lot of people are interested, and it's not just one weirdo, one strange person's, special issue, but they see, wow, hundreds of people are behind this, other cities are behind this, and all that. And we'll also really focus sharply on sustainability, not so much on the ethics issue around diet choice, and really focused on proposal support. We weren't asking people, hey, go vegan or go all plant-based, but would you support if we do more plant-based education to educate the community? And yeah, people could get on board with that. And it really paved the way for future asks. So if you go to the next slide, please. I think I just show here's success. So of that 2040 general plan, in the through the first 5-year thing, we got plant-based education in there. They got a town manager as the owner of the initiative. And it was basically to, educate and support residents in making more environmental choices when it comes to food choices, and include a variety of events and everything. And there was some budget allocated for it to help for the speaker series and some other things. And the next slide is, I think, just an example of, this is like just the top intro part of, explaining why food systems, food choices are so important. So it succeeded, and it's working. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Sarah, you're muted.
Samantha, are you there? You got to get
Sorry
off
about
mute.
that.
All right.
I was muted, but I just wanted to say thank you to Jan for his inspiring story. It's great to hear about successes like this, and really underscores the importance of education, both educating the public related to plant-based diets, but also educating our civic leaders, the elected officials, and making sure that they know why it's important. So congratulations on getting that implemented. I'm now happy to introduce Samantha Lowe. She is the U.S. liaison with Plant-Based Treaty and has been campaigning with them since 2023. She has also been instrumental in building partnerships and securing endorsements with businesses, nonprofit organizations such as LA Climate Week, and cities such as West Hollywood and Culver City. She's very passionate about the use of plant-based food systems as a solution not only to fight climate change, but to restore key ecosystems, reforest the earth, and rewild the land. Welcome, Samantha, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for the generous introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the call today. And thank you, Olka and Jan, for the incredible accomplishments in Campbell and Los Gatos. My name is Sam. I am a city campaigner and U.S. liaison for Plant-Based Treaty. Let's start with a quick overview of who we are, our mission, and our core principles. Plant-Based Treaty is a global campaign, grassroots initiative to fight climate change and protect the environment by centering the food system. We urge individuals, organizations, businesses, cities to partner with us to endorse the treaty for local and national governments to take action on our current food system. Next slide, please. We operate on 3 core principles. Redirect, which is public information and awareness campaigns to shift the narrative towards plant-based food systems. relinquish, which is to stop the problem from getting worse, and restore. When the land is free, we can let the earth heal, rewild and reforest the earth, and restore key ecosystems. Next slide, please. Since we began Plant-Based Treaty in August of 2021, we have secured endorsements from 63 cities, with four cities right now that we're in the process of finalizing, and over 260,000 individuals, which includes elected officials, celebrities, scientists, and over 4,000 businesses and organizations. Next slide, please. So we created these partnerships through effective and positive messaging. These are some issues that we highlight in our advocacy when we engage legislators, decision makers, stakeholders, or anyone who can help create plant-forward policies. So for example, we talk about the current food system, how inefficient it is, and that we're providing a solution. Adopting plant-based is sustainable and healthy for the planet, more cost-effective and beneficial for human health. And my favorite one is that to talk about how providing plant-based food is being the most inclusive, offering more choice and not limiting or taking anything away from anyone. Plant-based food policies are fast to implement and effective. And also by endorsing Plant-Based Treaty as an organization or business or city, you're taking collective action. So these are some of the messaging that we use as positive messaging when we talk to legislators, and they have been very effective. Next slide, please. And now I want to show you some of the graphics we use that goes along with the messaging. So here we have a graphic that talks about how inefficient the current food system is, where animal products just provides 37% of global protein and 18% of global calories. But yet it is responsible for 83% of the farmland and 73% of global deforestation. Next slide, please. We often emphasize on land use and water use because animal agriculture is extremely resource intensive. So if we switch to a plant-based food system, we could free up 3 billion hectares of land, and that's how we can restore key ecosystems, reforest the earth, rewild the land, and heal the planet. Next slide, please. Another reason we use to appeal to policymakers is that a plant-based food system saves money. We use the example of New York City hospitals using plant-based by default strategy for their first and second choice meals offered to their patients, and they have saved $500,000 in their first year of implementation. That's 59 cents saved per meal. Next slide, please. So now that I've gone over some of the more effective messaging, I want to share with you all the toolkits, graphics, and materials that we can provide to help with your advocacy so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we have a lot of effective template tools, such as email templates, sample public comments that you can customize as your own. You can watch our recorded public comments on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. We have recurring workshop and webinars that's available. We have Playbook to Follow, which is basically what Jan and Yoka talked about, how they approach city councils. And so we have also a dedicated team of campaigners that can help support your efforts and advocacy. And we can also help you build community buy-in. We can help you build a lot of buy-in from different organizations or different network within your city. And finally, we have a lot of colorful and inviting material, such as plant-based starter kits, postcards, posters, business cards, activity books, stickers, infographics, and many more. Next slide, please. For example, this is our foldable plant-based starter kit where it provides info on the environment, it has resources to recipes, books, and documentary, and it folds out to a really nice poster that people can put on their refrigerator. Next slide, please. And now here, this is what, on the left-hand side is a collage of graphics that we use to print onto posters or postcards and stickers. And then on the right-hand side, this is a placard you can use at events or restaurants serving plant-based or plant-based options to let guests know about the benefits of a plant-rich diet. Next slide, please. This is our superheroes coloring book, activity book. We have an entire classroom education program that talks to second to third to fifth grade students about how they can save the planet by eating more fruits and veggies and plant protein. It comes with music, art boards, lesson plan, and training videos. And so we just got a grant from Harris County to provide that at underserved communities, underserved elementary schools. So it's a very exciting program. Next slide, please. So please follow us. Follow us on at Plant-Based Treaty or at Plant-Based Treaty LA. We often post a lot of infographics, a lot of information that you can repost, that you can post on your social media with little nuggets of facts and information to help spread the message of why it's so important that we move towards a more plant-based food system. Next slide, please. This picture is, I want to show you how colorful our graphics look at community events. As you can see that, just how attractive and how inviting our tables look. We're always the most colorful booth at any event, and it really makes it easy to engage people into a conversation. And these materials can all be available for you to use to print, or we can send some to you if you're doing community events or if you are trying to do outreach and start a conversation about plant-based eating. Okay, next slide, please. So now that you've heard which topics are most effective and you've seen the material we use, it all leads up to what we ask of the policymakers, what we ask as policy change. On our website, we have a list of 40 proposals, but we work on each individual city campaign when we customize every ask specifically to that legislative body. We often narrow it down to a few proposals as the first phase because we want to develop a long-term working relationship with these decision makers and legislators. So for the first phase, we often ask for a public information campaign or include benefits of plant-based food system in their climate action plan or sustainability goals. And then we always ask for plant-based by default at their city events and meetings. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I want to share with you a very successful campaign that we worked on in West Hollywood. In June of 2024, West Hollywood adopted a policy that requires all food and beverages to be served at city-sponsored events and meetings to be plant-based by default. That doesn't mean that it's only plant-based, but everything by default is plant-based, and that if guests would like something else for whatever reason, they can make that upon request. They can request other items. And in October, West Hollywood endorsed the Plant-Based Treaty, which we started our partnership, and we started our public information campaign, which means in January of 2025 and 2026, they promoted Veganuary, which is promoting eating plant-based for an entire month. They promoted it on their website, their social media, and their local businesses. And then as part of the public information campaign, we worked with them on a large-scale community event called Food Day in WeHo. So in both April of 2025 and 2026, they co-sponsored and co-hosted a large-scale city event to spread awareness about the benefits of plant-based eating and using plant-based food as a solution and to how local food policy can make a difference. So this is a very successful campaign because they really embrace the public information and working with us in making sure that the community is aware of how important it is that we shift the narrative towards more plant-based food systems. Next slide, please. So thank you for joining. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sustainable San Mateo County, the whole team for organizing this webinar. If you have any questions about plant-based treaty, please contact me. Please take a scan of the QR code, and I would love to start a conversation with you about how we can get your local city to adopt more plant-forward policies. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam, Olka, Jan. That was fabulous. I really love what you guys were talking about, the positive message. You're really focusing on giving people choice. I wanted to stay on all those slides you were going through, Samantha, because they were all so vibrant and just, compelling. Really important information on there. Um, I also thought the comments about just how long-term this is. Samantha, you were talking about it. Actually, all three of you, talked about this is not an overnight solution, right? This is about persistence, and building relationships. And it was great to hear about how you bring your network together, your friends, your neighbors, getting a group together, to really go after this and build support. It's always more fun with a group, right? So thank you very much. We're gonna turn to a panel discussion, but first let me just introduce myself. I know many of you on the call, but I'm Molly Carter. I am the Communications and Outreach Lead for SSMC. And I have prepared a question for each speaker. So we'll start with that, but then we're going to open it up to the audience. So start getting your questions ready now. You can put them into the chat, and then when we open it up, if you want to raise your hand and unmute, we're a fairly small group here, so we can make this very friendly. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So, Samantha, I wanted to start with you as our last speaker. And I wanted to understand, from your, for individuals who don't see themselves as real policy people, what are the most effective first steps that they can take to help build that grassroots momentum for the policy-based commitments, for their city or their school or even their employer?
Great. Thank you, Molly, for that question. Yeah, so what an individual who is not policy focused, what they can do is they can start with their social media, like they can start taking all the material that, for example, that I was showing from Plant-Based Treaty, they can start spreading the message with their own network. They can try to look for community events that they could participate in and start tabling and just start talking to people about the importance of moving towards a more plant-based food system. So a good start would be to start with your own community, look at your city calendar, see what kind of upcoming events, maybe there's an environmental event coming up or sustainability event coming up, or, start participating in, with the local, any nonprofit organization that is focused on climate or sustainability, and you can start from there. So that's what I would suggest. Thank you.
Great. And I'm guessing Plant-Based Treaty has some maybe helpful resources to help with some of those ideas.
Absolutely. We have a lot of material that you can take with you, that you can print, that you can look at online, and then we have a dedicated team of campaigners who can give that support to you as well. And we have plenty we can help absolutely do a lot of hand holding. We love getting involved with other cities in activating our campaign.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that. So I have a follow-up question for Jan, somewhat related. So I think as people think about getting involved, one of the fears may be the pushback that they get, the questions that they get back.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you when an individual faces that kind of pushback or skepticism around plant forward policies, what messaging or coalition building strategies have you seen that really work to keep the momentum moving forward and really address those concerns and questions.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, obviously there often is pushback around things regarding what's considered, personal choice, around diets, and so forth, because it is a personal choice. Um, the big focus, what we did to kind of deal with that one in this instance here is the focus was really on education. I mean, the truth is, the fact of the matter is, most people are not deeply, have a busy life, and they're not that aware of how impactful our food choices are. Um, and so it's a matter of just education. They just don't know. And so the focus of the effort that we did in Los Gatos was really around getting plant-based education into the general plan, kind of getting the towns and city council, town council's blessing to support those educational activities with the citizenry. So it was not about making people go vegan or doing something like that, but just education. Because at the end of the day, we got a lot of smart people who live here in Silicon Valley, and they would like to make informed choices. Most people are not well informed, so we're basically just asking for the city's support to provide information, about that, so they can make informed decisions. So the focus really on the effort was, you have to change all your habits and redo everything today. It's just that, would you support us in having the city support doing more education on this topic? And while they're doing, well, why is that so important? Well, then you get a chance to do a little education right there about the environmental impact of certain foods versus other foods. And you got to remember also that the city, I mean, they maybe can't tell you to get out of your car, but they can talk about the benefits of biking to work. They can put in bike lanes. I mean, we can encourage solar. I mean, the town, the city, they can make recommendations. They can make suggestions to the citizenry that are more sustainable. And food is just one of those things. And there's one other thing, is a lot of people aren't aware just how much waste there is. I mean, for all you who do study this, about 40% of the food that we make never even gets consumed. So food waste is an enormous issue, regardless of what type of food it is. Just reducing food waste is another huge, huge issue, because it generated all that, all those emissions, used all that water, all that land, and never even got consumed, goes to the landfill and generates more methane there. It's just a travesty. So there's a chance to both talk about food choices and food waste in the effort.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And I think that approach, just educating so people can make informed decisions.
Right.
That's what it's all about. Part of that education, so I'm going to turn to Ulka now. Part of that education, we've heard a lot about the environmental impact of animal-based eating. But I wanted to turn to some of the health benefits, and wanted to ask you, when speaking with policymakers, institutional leaders, how can individuals effectively communicate the health benefits of plant-based diets without overwhelming them with data or, or sounding too prescriptive?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question because it is very exciting, the robust amount of research we have on the health benefits of plant-based diets, and we get really passionate about it. But I would say, in general, we're all naturally more receptive when, what somebody is saying aligns with what we're excited about and what our priorities are. So I would say begin by listening to your city leaders' priorities and interests. So what do you know that they're interested in, or what they're really primarily concerned with? For example, if it's health equity, I might focus on the fact that plant-based diets are more inclusive, as we've mentioned, especially for those who are lactose intolerant, which is most of the world, most people in the world, or for those who don't consume meat for religious or cultural reasons. So you're boosting inclusion. Plant-based diets can boost nutrition, prevent diseases, especially for those communities who have the least access to healthy food. And who are disproportionately higher risk for those illnesses. So, before launching into all the diseases and how it works, really thinking about what's going to speak to this leader and what really is going to resonate with them, and then maybe just leaving some room for, would you like more information on XYZ? Let me know. I'd be happy to send you the references for those.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Speak to what their priorities are. That's great. And I know a lot of the cities right now are having blue sky setting meetings here at the beginning of the year where they are publicly setting their priorities. So it'd be important to listen to those and try to tie into those. Okay, well, I know I see some questions have already come into the chat. Let's open things up. If you'd like to raise your hand and come off mute and just ask your question directly, you are welcome to do that. In the meantime, we will turn over here to the chat and see what kind of questions have come in. Let's see. Yeah, I figured we might get into this a little bit. So the new guidelines, the new food guidelines that the federal administration, the HHS and USDA, as Greg pointed out, so there have been changes to the dietary guidelines. So Greg's question is, what changes have you needed to make now that there are these new dietary recommendations favoring more animal-based diets? Would either of the three of you like to tackle that one or at least start?
I'll jump in. I did an answer in the chat, but I mean, I'm not sure how many town councils or city councils really pay attention to the federal guidelines. I mean, there's quite a bit of controversy around them because of the just violations of the process by which they were developed. They took the multi-year U.S. Dietary Expert Committee guidelines that were developed over 2 years with nutrition experts like Christopher Gardner from Stanford and all that, and just chucked it out the window. Went to a special handpicked committee of people, 7 of 10 of whom have direct ties to the National Cattlemen's Association and Dairy Council and things like that, and say, hey, what did you guys want? And came up with some new guidelines. So it's they don't reflect the current science in any way. I mean, and they're very contradictory. I mean, in the written guidelines, it says to reduce consumption or limit consumption of saturated fat, but then in the new inverted pyramid, they feature and promote the leading sources of saturated fat, which is red meat, dairy, and cheese. So it's kind of a cluster, actually. So I'm not. The only thing I could imagine is if so there's a court filing against it because of the illegality of the process by which they came out. That was filed by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. We'll see how that plays out in court. I imagine it'll just keep getting appealed until the next administration comes in. So we're going to have what we have for the time being. It's best if people go, hey, what about this? Or it says recommend that. Point them to a million other websites that sum up decades of nutritional search about what's actually leads to better health outcomes versus worse health outcomes. So I'm not sure if it impacts things really at the city or council level or a plant-based treaty initiative. If you want to take that up in your city, the weight of evidence over decades is that plant strong foods that are rich in whole plant foods lead to better health outcomes. Foods rich in junk foods and animal foods lead to worse outcomes. It's not complicated.
And exactly. And I'll also add that I think this, if anything, just really reinforces the work that we're doing. So, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans really directs all federal nutrition policy, including, school lunches. So there's not a whole lot we can do there specifically, although, I think parents and students can speak up at their schools. This might be a good time to really, I know there's been a lot of efforts in terms of really having a plant-based milk option in schools without having to have a medical written letter. And there's been a lot of progress there. I think keeping those efforts going. And I think really this is where grassroots efforts, from the bottom up. So, USDA, we not to say we can't do anything, but that's a harder policy to change, though there are efforts like Jan said, but really, kind of activating our grassroots efforts. And this is where that information, where you can provide that information to your city leaders. This may be what our dietary guidelines say, but here's what the the body of evidence says about health and plant-based diets, and hear specifically, again, how it fits in specifically with their priorities. They might not want to hear the whole story and why we disagree, but let's speak to what they're interested in. So just really focusing on that. And I say just doubling down on what we're doing, because if we show, we do what we can to correct those misconceptions about nutrition, to really up our game with our advocacy, that's really where we can start to make some change, and work around the policy. Because at the end of the day, if we're changing our diet, it doesn't matter what the guidelines say, that we're creating a shift.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. Yeah, thank you both. Those are incredible. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that both Jan and Ilka was saying. And also, just if you look at other dietetic association, all the major dietetic association basically recommends eating more plants, adding more plants and more fruits. If you look at just for comparison, and like Ilka said, a lot of times when you talk to your local legislators, focus on what they are their priorities are. And if this is their priorities, then you can show them the comparison. And a lot of and also the current guideline, if you look at the sourcing, I believe it was 7 out of 8 of the sourcing came from is basically funded research funded by the meat and dairy industry. So it's a very biased diagram that you're seeing right now, and those are some of the things that you can point out. Thank you for that question.
And Samantha, while you're on, Ulka had mentioned the schools and trying to do advocacy with the schools. I believe Plant-Based Treaty has some resources specifically for working with schools. And just a plug, SSMC has a webinar, the third webinar in this series, which will be on February 10th, is focused on the whole school community coming together, and working to advocate for plant-based policies. And this relates to a question that Leslie has in the chat. Have you tried the same approach also with school boards now that California schools all give meals? And I know in our local area that is the case. What advice do you have for, we'll preview the third webinar here. What advice do you have for working within the school environment?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. So definitely in California here, the schools are mandated or controlled by a school board, and the school board are very similar. The structures that's very similar to a city council. So they have school board meetings, and you can definitely participate in the school board meetings and appeal to the school board members of what you would like to see as more healthy options for the students. And we actually have been working within a coalition group that is for school systems, and we belong in a coalition that specifically works for that. And just like the Plant-Powered School Meals Act that got passed, which Alka was talking about, which is not so students can request plant milk without a doctor's note, whereas it was required before. So those are some of the work that our coalition works on, the laws that we're working on. And so as for individuals to start, you can join us, join the coalition, or you can start by attending school board meetings. And that's how you can start there with getting schools to have more options, more healthy options. Thank you.
Great. And this ties in really well with one of the next questions that's in the chat, and that is working with youth, because I imagine if you're going to try to convince the school board, it would be great to have a youth coalition working with you. But yeah, Joey in the chat asked about youth engagement and how effective that can be. How would you say is the best way to implement youth engagement in your advocacy? And I mean, anyone can take that, but I know, Ulka, you specifically mentioned the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Team. Any tips, lessons that came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe meeting with them, and they have a great couple of times a year. So Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, and they're young climate leaders, and they work with local politicians and lawmakers, and they have a lot of political power locally, as they should. And they work on a lot of initiatives for sustainability. So they're doing great work in our community. And a couple times a year, well, a few times a year, but a couple times a year, they have like a summit where they have lawmakers and they kind of learn how to be good advocates, and they have speakers. So I would encourage everybody to go to those. They're really great. A lot of like hundreds of people come. They also had a leadership academy this summer, a 3-week course where they got a crash course on how to be a climate leader. And that's how I got involved, where I was invited to speak about sustainable food systems. And from that talk, I connected with a lot of the young leaders there who were specifically interested in sustainable foods. And then they have a climate health collaborative, and I spoke there. And so as long as you kind of get your foot in the door with them a little bit, kind of learn what their priorities are, what the young leaders are interested in learning, go to their events, and you can connect with them that way. Another way that I connected with our youth commission at the city council, I haven't formally met with them, but I went to the state of the city where the mayor speaks about the year's accomplishments, and I ran into the youth commission there and kind of spoke with them in person, and have had emailed back and forth with their kind of mentor of their group. And so, and then they will invite you to one of their meetings, and you can kind of, share your initiative and see what they're interested in. You can also go to the website and see what initiatives are they working on and where they might already be addressing plant-based diets, and see where you can kind of get involved that way. But that's kind of how I've connected.
I would like to talk about how we connect with the youth advocacy and engagement. We do a lot of engagement with youth, and one way to do it, which is by going to your local community college or university. We participated in a lot of tabling events at Pasadena City College, at UCLA, at USC, at Caltech, at pretty much every local college or university that we could come across. We have participated in outreach, and also we've talked with the sustainability student groups. And also, if there's a plant future or plant forward or any groups like that, that is, the students that are working on making a better world, a better planet. You can definitely engage with those students, and they are very, very passionate about working together on policies, maybe even policies at the school, changing the menu at their cafeteria. So a lot of local schools, community college, you'll find a lot of young activists, young advocates who you can definitely engage with. And also in our county, LA County, we created a youth group created Youth Climate Commission, and we've been able to recommend commissioners into the commission because we have a relationship with the county. We have a relationship with LA County, and when the spot opened up, they asked us for some recommendations. So we were able to recommend plant-based advocates into the Youth Climate Commission of LA County. So that was very exciting to have young leaders who are also very passionate about plant-based food in working with the county. So thank you.
And I'll just add that Silicon Valley Youth Climate are 9 through 12. So they're not higher education students. They're high school students who could also be advocates for K through 12 nutrition initiatives.
That's great. All comes back to the relationships.
And also showing just the methods we use to get things done with the city council, which is, get a few people who are committed to it, get a few more people. Again, if you're working with, if you have school age, kids, if it's just one parent, concerned parent, that's only so much. If you get a half dozen, okay, there's a little bit to it. If you have a dozen or 2 dozen, all writing an email, all showing up at a city, or at a school meeting of some kind where, you can influence the food choices. Just getting non-dairy milk in schools, which is now allowed. One of the people, I think Stephen mentioned in the chat, there was new federal legislation. It used to be the USDA prohibited plant milks in the schools. And then if you had to have it, they had a small stock and you needed a doctor's note. Now you can actually have plant-based milks in the school. And it's really important because it used to be dairy milk was forced upon really every student. They'd come down the tray and it was put on their tray. My wife worked in the middle school. She was a teacher. And you go look in the trash can at the end of the school lunch hour, and there's 200 cartons of unopened cartons of milk in the trash. These kids don't want to drink milk. Milk for them, it's gross. And a lot of kids, particularly from other countries, are lactose intolerant or lactose normal, right? 70% of the world's population can't drink milk after weaning. So, at least fighting for one cause of just getting, more plant-based milks, in stock that kids can request now without doctor's note. That would be a big win. Just get a small coalition of concerned parents who think like you, and even a half dozen or so could have an impact. And also just having more non-dairy vegetarian options. If they offer burritos, they always have cheese in them. Well, if you're lactose intolerant, you can't eat those. So just, advocating for, true plant-based options, at least one decent one on the menu can go a long ways.
All right, we just have a few minutes left here, and then we're going to just wrap up with a couple announcements. But anyone who asked a question in the chat, if you had additional or follow-up questions to that, please raise your hand or come off mute. We're doing our best to address your questions, but it's always great to hear from you. And otherwise, anybody else, again, last couple minutes, if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, this is your chance. And thank you for the resources people have put into the chat. Some really great links in there. Okay.
Yeah, I would be interested maybe to hear a little bit more of the personal stories from the panelists as far as like what got you so interested and passionate so that you would become advocates, so maybe like because sometimes that can inspire other people to do the same.
Who's going to jump in?
Start, Jan.
Yeah, I'll just quick story. So I went vegan, as they say, or started making vegan choices back in the mid 1980s. So I'm in my 40th year now. And the thing is, I read a bunch of information and statistics, and I just realized that it was unfair for me, who was trying to, care about the environment. I love the natural world, and I don't want to hurt the natural world. I love wildlife. I love people. And so when I learned how much land and water and pollution and emissions were associated with certain food choices that I grew up loving, and I grew up right here in, in the peninsula, I was like, holy smokes, I had no idea. I didn't know. But once I learned, and this is all pre-internet, I just changed over and never looked back. Then I got busy raising family and all that for many, many years. And then just in the last few years, really since COVID, I was like, I really want to work on this full time. I want to be an advocate for transforming the food system and people's choices. Because the thing is that, we can wait for government to change. That's going to be slow. Industry, well, we're in a capitalist society. Profit motives are always going to trump things. So we really have to work on people. We have to work on people's choices. And that's why there's such an emphasis with plant-based advocates, that organization, and my own efforts, which is really on educating people so they can make more informed decisions and therefore live a more sustainable life. So there it is in a nutshell.
And I'll say for myself, my underlying passion for plant-based diets is animal welfare. But why I'm so passionate about policy and local plant-based policy is because we're looking at systems change. And so it doesn't rely on changing individual hearts and minds, each person asking them to change their diets. We know that these behavioral changes are pretty hard. But when we change people's environment and nudge them into eating a little bit healthier by putting a plant-based meal as a default rather than a meat-based, 80% of the time they're going to just go with what's offered first without taking any of their freedom of choice away. And so I think changing systems to nudge people to make more plant-based choices, I think is very powerful. And it really sets a precedent, for your impact. Your impact can really be amplified because now we set a precedent in, the great work that Samantha and her team have done in West Hollywood, LA County, hopefully, fingers crossed, Campbell, Imagine if we spread that across the Bay Area. We didn't have to go person to person asking people to change their diets. We're basically creating systemic change and setting a precedent for the movement to spread and really amplifying our impact. So to me, that's very exciting.
Hi, thank you for that question. For me, I became vegan in 2019, and I was very active actually politically. I was engaged in a couple of local political clubs. And when I became vegan, I wanted to use politics to help the animals. And I made a presentation at a club called Democrats of Pasadena Foothills, why veganism is progressivism. And I know that when presenting to political clubs, you have to give them some sort of call to action. I know I can't just say, oh, after my presentation, everybody goes vegan, right? So I looked up information on what action they can take, and that's how I found plant-based treaty. I found that plant-based treaty, so I made the presentation and I said, okay, so number one is eat as much plant-based as you can. Number two is support organizations that help animals. And number three is you can collectively as a club and individually endorse plant-based treaty. So after the end of the presentation, everybody raised their hand and said, "Oh yeah, well let the club endorse plant-based treaty because it's a collective action." But then one voice said, "Oh, wait a minute, we are a democratic club and we have to take things in the process." So we went back to the drawing table, came back with the resolution, and we actually added, which worked in our favor because we added more stuff to the resolution. Is number one, the club has to recognize that we're in a climate emergency. Number two, the club is going to endorse plant-based treaty as a collective. And number three is that all club-sponsored events will be plant-based. Anything they pay will be plant-based. And then they took a vote and it passed. And so that's how I got into the work with plant-based treaty because it's just very effective and impactful when you get any organization, whether it's or a city or a body, a governing body, a business, to make that policy change because you know that it actually is at helping the environment, helping the animals, helping humans. So that's how I got involved. Thank you for that question.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I really appreciate all of our panelists contributing both their personal stories and some very actionable tips that our audience can take. And I thank everyone for being here and asking such probing questions. What a great discussion. So SSMC has collected resources on plant-based diets on our webpage, and we invite you to explore them. You can get recipes, you can find new restaurants that support healthy plant-based food choices, and you can learn more about the ways to stay engaged. We've also linked to many of the plant-based treaty resources there. We have a few events coming up that I think you might be interested in. As I mentioned earlier, we're hosting 3 indicators report follow-up webinars for these different audiences as shown on the screen. Tonight's was the first event, and a recording will be available soon. You can also register for either or both of the next events using the QR code on the screen, or we'll add a link to the chat. And finally, we're very excited to announce our 27th annual awards celebration, which will be on March 25th in South San Francisco. It is a must-attend event. It attracts over 300 elected leaders, sustainability managers, and other government staff, as well as nonprofits, community advocates, and students. This year, we've reimagined the format and we've lowered the ticket prices to make the event more accessible to everyone in the sustainability community. Tickets start at just $25 for students and $75 for others. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. Tickets go on sale tomorrow. So that'll be distributed via email. So I'll close with another thank you to our panelists for offering their time and wisdom tonight, and to all of you for being here and caring for our planet and our county. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.